Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Monday, September 9th, and oh boy, did we just have a crazy weekend of sports. Football, from college football to the NFL, was wild. We are going to break down the winners and the losers from both of the first 2 days on the first full weekend of football. We'll also do a little bit of a preview for Monday Night Football as Aaron Rodgers takes his New York Jets into Santa Clara to take on Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature to do the exact same thing. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for spending your Monday afternoon talking some sports with me. But without further ado, we're going to get right into the craziness that was football this week. And we're going to start off in the NFL. NFL Week 1 winners. And I would be remiss if I didn't start off the winners with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott signs a massive deal, the biggest deal in NFL history, making him the highest paid player ever. 4 years, $240 million, average annual value of $60 million. $60 million. With an $80 million signing bonus. He's a very rich man. The Cowboys had a very tumultuous offseason. They had to deal with 3 stars, 2 of which have now been signed in Dak Prescott signing his $60 million a year contract. CeeDee Lamb signing his $34 million a year contract. Now there's just one left in Micah Parsons. And Micah Parsons, all news I've seen saying he's not going to sign until the end of the season. But Dak Prescott gets his money at the very last minute, just a couple of hours before the game was to begin. I believe 4 hours before kickoff, he signs this deal. They really made us wait until the very last second, but Dak Prescott and the Cowboys get it done. It's an interesting look because I feel like waiting this long kind of puts them behind the 8 ball if you're the Cowboys. If you're looking for the Cowboys' stake, obviously, I'm pretty sure the agents got what they want. They got the biggest contract by a pretty good margin. Again, just 10 years ago, the highest paid quarterback was $22 million. That is an insane number to go up. That goes up $40 million in just the last 10 years, which is crazy to see how much that has grown, just the money at the quarterback position. But I digress. That's a whole nother conversation there. Dak and his agents obviously got what they want. They got that $60 million contract. They got that big money. They're going to play. They're going to be happy. And everyone in the Cowboys locker room seems to be very happy for him. They seem to say, hey, it's worth it. And Dak is a top 10 quarterback. The Cowboys had to pay him. Love him or hate him, the Cowboys, if they want to keep competing, need Dak. They took a risk on Dak, kind of, when they had Tony Romo. Now, he got hurt. They still had Tony Romo, so they had a backup plan if Dak didn't work out. But Dak works out. They don't have a backup plan, and they can see that very clearly. Some people call for Cooper Rush. Why would you call for Cooper Rush? Cooper Rush isn't going to be better than Dak. Some people were saying, oh, maybe Trey Lance is the answer. Trey Lance, clearly, after that preseason, is not the answer. So the Cowboys have their hands tied. Maybe they were going to let him hit free agency. Maybe they were going to try their options, but they see now they didn't really have a choice. Dak Prescott gets his money. He is one of the biggest winners in Week 1. The other big winner from Week 1, Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley joins a new team, NFC East rivals of my New York Giants. He joins with the Philadelphia Eagles, plays his first game in Brazil. Not only does he look good with a brand new offensive line, look like he's returned to form, look like he's going to be an absolute monster, He scores 3 touchdowns. He goes out there on what was awful field conditions over there in Brazil, just slipping and sliding everywhere. Saquon Barkley himself has trouble with the field in the beginning. He slips, loses 5 yards on his very first touch as an Eagle. Then Jalen Hurts throws an interception. That field condition was awful. It was a very ugly game, especially at the beginning. But Saquon Barkley powers through it, has a beautiful catch for a touchdown in the corner of the end zone. Beautiful throw by Jalen Hurts to get him the ball there. Nice toe tap catch, make sure he gets both feet down, and then, powering through, rushing for over 100 yards, scoring 3 total touchdowns. Saquon Barkley is an absolute monster. He is another winner from week 1. Again, we can go through the rest of this real quick, but a whole team I want to shout out. The New England Patriots are a winner from week 1. The New England Patriots came in with expectations of being quite possibly and realistically the worst team in the entire NFL. The Patriots have arguably the worst offensive line. They don't have a big name on defense. Their quarterback situation is a mess with, the discussion of whether or not you start a rookie, whether you start Jacoby Brissett as your journeyman, as your stopgap, to let your rookie not get completely beat up by the defenses you're going to play. The next winner coming up is the Tennessee Titans defense. And I know it's going to sound a little weird to put the Titans on this list after their loss. Really, the whole defense from the Chicago-Tennessee game were winners. And it's not going to be the offense. It's not going to be Caleb Williams. This team was just completely, honestly, a mess. But the defense from the Tennessee Titans, new additions, Ernest Jones, L'Jarius Sneed, these guys that they bring in on the defensive end come in and play immediate dividends for the Titans defense. And the same thing for the Bears. Their defense came in and did their job. They went and scored 2 touchdowns on their own. Blocked punt return for a touchdown, a pick 6, forced another fumble, got another interception. They went out there and won the game for the Bears single-handedly. Caleb Williams and the offense got absolutely nothing done. But the Bears defense stepped up. They got the job done. It was very, very impressive to see. This whole week 1 defenses were very impressive. Another winner. Houston at Indianapolis. This was one of my favorite games of the week. Anthony Richardson is just so much fun to watch play football. I'm sure you guys have seen this play, and I'd play it for you if I had the copyright rights to. But early on in the football game, Anthony Richardson drops back, slips, regains his balance, and without really stepping into the throw, bombs the ball 70 yards downfield into a bucket for Alec Pierce. That was maybe the most impressive throw I have ever seen. Straight up. That was one of the most impressive things I have ever seen been done on a football field. Not only does he have the best arm in the NFL, you can try and dispute that, but I think I might die on that hill. Anthony Richardson has the best arm in the NFL, and I really don't think it's that close. Not only is that a situation over there, but you have now him rushing the ball. You saw when it came down to it, they were driving, they needed a touchdown to keep it close. 4th and goal, he runs over a defensive lineman, a linebacker, powers his way into the end zone. The whole defense couldn't take him down. He is 255 pounds, the 3rd heaviest quarterback in the history of the NFL. He's faster than everyone on the field. He has the strongest arm in the NFL. Now, if he could just fix his accuracy, which always was his biggest weakness, right? The accuracy on his throws. We saw it over the middle, especially. He was a little behind, and deep balls down the sideline to Adonai Mitchell. He missed 2 of them that really would have blown this game open for the Colts, a game that was really close overall. But that game was just so much fun to watch. And really, I think both of those teams are winners. Now, obviously, the Colts lose it in the end in a tight game, but C.J. Stroud and that new offense looked great. Stephon Diggs, 2 touchdowns. Joe Mixon, a touchdown. Those new additions coming in big. Nico Collins with an amazing catch to seal the game. A play that, honestly, I thought was absolutely intercepted. I thought it was intercepted. That ball on the sideline on 3rd and long to seal the game. Nico Collins gets his whole leg down, shin, thigh, knee, toe, everything. Keeps him in bounds. What a play to end the game. CJ Stroud looked awesome. He also had one of those what are you doing plays that works out, throwing across the middle to Nico Collins, into double coverage to Nico Collins, on his knee on 4th down to convert. I mean, that's just not normal what happened in that game in Indianapolis. That was probably my favorite game of the entire week. It was really crazy to see. And going back to Dallas, just their whole team was a win. Dak Prescott obviously got his contract. Zeke looked like he was returning to form, which was not on my bingo card for 2024. Now, both offenses in this game struggled, and we'll get to the Browns in a little bit. But this Dallas team looked like it had new energy, and maybe that's just because they were playing the Browns, and the Browns are a team that looks like they have no energy. So that kind of dichotomy between the two can really make it look like more on one side, and I don't want to overreact to week 1. But the Cowboys could be really good. The Cowboys could be good this year if their defense continues to play like that. 2 more winners I want to get onto before we move on to the next segment. J.K. Dobbins, how about that? Coming back after missing multiple years. For the last couple seasons, he continues to be out due to injury. He comes back, rushes 10 times for 130 yards and a touchdown in a new Jim Harbaugh system, going from one Harbaugh to the other. He looks really good. He is ready to go. And this is going to be an offense that is going to run the ball a lot. They went out and they got offensive line talent. They said, screw the receivers. We're running the ball. And that's what they did. They ran it down their throats, much like the Lions did with David Montgomery, as in that overtime period to end the game against the Rams. Those two teams just played hard-nosed football, and I know I talk about this all the time, the ebbs and the flows in sports, especially back when we were talking hockey. Goal scoring, goalies, you go up and down for which one is more dominant. We were just in a huge upswing for quarterbacks. I mentioned that stat that, the highest paid quarterback has gone up $40 million in the last 10 years, right? Ridiculous. I also, looking at week 1, we look at passing leaders. This was the least amount of passing yards, the least amount of points, the least amount of passing touchdowns. We're seeing defenses start to catch up. We're seeing teams that are going to old-fashioned, the Lions, running the ball down teams' throats. What are they doing to stop it? The Lions have dominated this last season plus with that run game, Derrick Henry has been able to do his thing. You see the Ravens, again, dominating in the run. They can still pass, and you need to be able to have that passing attack. But are we starting to see a little bit more of that push back to the other side of running the ball? Is that going to be there? And I know passing is never going to go away because it's so much quicker if you can throw the ball 40 yards. You have to get it through less people. But we're starting to see an incorporation of the run game more, and maybe we're going to start to see running backs get higher priority again. In that ebb and flow right now, I think we're starting to reach a high point for passing and wide receivers, and we're going to start to head back towards the running backs, at least for a little bit, because defenses are evolving. But anyway, let me know who your biggest winner was from this week in the NFL. I'm sure I missed some stuff. There was so much craziness going on this week. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the losers from week 1 in the NFL, including the Miami-Dade Police Department, the Denver Broncos, the Cleveland Browns, and much more here on GSMC Podcast. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, September 9th. We are returning from our first full week of football, not just in the NFL, but also in college football. So 2 straight days of absolute chaos. In our last segment, we just went over the winners from week 1 of the NFL football season, a wild week 1 as well. Something I completely forgot to mention was the kickoffs. Returns were up 15% from last season. That's a win for the new dynamic kickoff as well. But in this segment, we're taking a look at the losers. We saw everything that went right. Let's take a look at everything that went wrong. But before we get into it, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the losers of this NFL week 1, and what a crazy one it was. Let's start off with my New York Giants. I don't think we need to say much about that. There were 2 teams this NFL week 1 that looked absolutely awful. It was the New York Giants and the Carolina Panthers. Those 2 teams looked hopeless. They looked abysmal. Those 2 teams looked like they should just start preparing for next season. Both of these teams had quarterbacks that, as we were preparing for the season, I said this was a make it or break it year for both of them. And it looks like after week 1 again, I'm not one to try and overreact to things, but it seems like we're landing, at least heavily leaning, towards the break it side of things. There were chants to bench Daniel Jones. Now, Brian Daboll has come out and said Daniel Jones is the starter week 2 here in Washington. Now, is that the right decision? Were they getting booed out of the stadium? I don't know, and yes are the answer to those questions. The Giants' offense looked sorry. The defense had its moments against what is a really tough offense to go against in the Minnesota Vikings. Now, how real Sam Darnold's near-perfect day was, I don't think it's that real. You're going up against a really weak secondary with some of the greatest weapons in all of football, but we will see what happens. The Carolina Panthers down 30-3 at halftime. That is a college football score. The Saints pulled almost all of their starters in the 3rd quarter. That is kind of disrespectful, and it's not looking good. Derek Brown, really the last remaining solid piece on defense for these Carolina Panthers, a defense that was already going to be abysmal, might be out for the season. He needs surgery. That defense is only going to get worse, and this is a defense that, may I remind you, just gave up 47 points to the New Orleans Saints. 47 points to Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, and the New Orleans Saints. I can't even imagine, honestly, what the point total is going to be like when they go up later in the season against a better opponent than the Saints. Heck, even when they go up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Atlanta Falcons, who looked awful as well. Kirk Cousins looked like he couldn't move. They're yet another loser for me, but we'll get back to the Falcons in a second. I want to talk about another thing on Brazil. Not only were those field conditions a big loss, but so was Jordan Love. Jordan Love goes down on the third to last play of the game for the Packers. He's out 3 to 6 weeks with an MCL sprain. That is horrible news for the Packers because they went out and they cleared their quarterback room out in order to bring in Malik Willis. And we got the chance to see Malik Willis a little bit in action. 2 plays. One of them, they were trying to get a little bit closer for a Hail Mary. He bullets the ball way off target to a wide open Romeo Doubs on the sideline. Nothing. Then on what I expected him to be able to make, just a simple throw it up into the end zone, he can't even get the throw off. He scrambles around in the pocket. He doesn't look comfortable. He doesn't even get a throw up. He gets sacked on a Hail Mary attempt. And that is just sad. I have not a lot of faith in Malik Willis, to put it lightly. I am quite honestly shocked the Packers haven't gone out and signed Ryan Tannehill yet. But the Packers season might be done before it starts. The Packers were a trendy Super Bowl pick by some people. I wasn't quite there with them, but Jordan Love definitely does look really good. In what we saw, him and Jaden Reed have a nice connection. He's going to be worth that $55 million when he comes back. And it's awful news for the Packers, unfortunately, that happened. I'm not going to blame the field entirely. It was just kind of unlucky. The way it was, he just kind of got twisted up. He made a great play there, too, avoiding a sack, being able to flip it backwards to Josh Jacobs so he could get out of bounds and the game didn't end. Unfortunately, he did get hurt, though, and their Packers are very lucky it's not a season ending because coming back in week 7, they can kind of pull what they did last year, run the table, make it to the playoffs as a 7 seed. But as far as winning the division, unfortunately, I think that's off the table, especially after what we saw the Lions do this last week. Another loser, the Arizona Cardinals. Not exactly the whole Arizona Cardinals, but the passing game. One that I thought, especially with the inclusion of one Marvin Harrison Jr., one Maserati Marv, they would be able to move the ball a little bit. And they were in the first half. Kyler Murray had less than 50 passing yards in the second half. Marvin Harrison barely was targeted in the game. There were times where he was open. There was one play, especially down the stretch, where they were driving. He was wide open down the sideline. Kyler Murray just missed him. They should be able to get back on the same page soon. Marvin Harrison needs to be involved in that offense, and I know they scored a lot of points, 28 points on this Buffalo Bills defense that is quite honestly abysmal, but they probably should have scored more, maybe even won this game if Kyler Murray is able to make that read. I need to see more out of this Cardinals team, but they did look a little bit promising, just a little bit. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the Atlanta Falcons, in an ugly game, both get a loser tag. Same thing with the Cleveland Browns. All 3 of those teams put up performances that, I mean, it's kind of unexcusable. The Cleveland Browns, the Steelers, those 2 teams are very similar. In fact, I might even say they're mirror images of each other. They both have stars on defense in TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. Their defense is doing everything they can to keep them in the game. TJ Watt had 3 strip sacks. Almost all of them were called off. I think he recovered 3 fumbles. 2 of them were called off due to penalties. He is a monster against this Atlanta Falcons team that just looked incredibly disappointing. Kirk Cousins could not move around at all. That Achilles injury is going to be an issue. I think they really need to think about giving him a little more time to heal. Put Michael Penix in the game, maybe. You drafted him that high for a reason. He looked good in his 1 appearance in the preseason. No idea why they didn't play him more in the preseason. Trying to hide him for something? Nah. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The Atlanta Falcons looked all out of sorts. They need to figure out a way to, win a ball game, get some offense going at all. They did get a touchdown to one Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts' agendas are being pushed for the next 3 weeks now because he scored a touchdown. But even outside of that one touchdown, like the Kyle Pitts didn't do much in this offense. Bijan didn't have a particularly great game. Kirk Cousins just didn't look like the guy that we were expecting him to look like behind this team. Now, the Atlanta defense did their job against Justin Fields and not a very good Pittsburgh offense, but 6 field goals was enough for the Pittsburgh Steelers to win a game. And now they're beating everybody else in that conference, in that division, not the conference. 1-0. Everyone else is 0-1. Kind of crazy to believe. And the last thing I wanted to touch on here, the Miami-Dade Police Department arrested Tyreek Hill right outside of the game. Calais Campbell comes over. He gets into a little bit of a altercation as well. Tyreek Hill is in a fan video laid out on the ground in handcuffs. And they're saying it's because it was a traffic stop, speeding and reckless driving. Those are the counts he's being charged with. They come out today and they say he was resisting. That's what the Miami-Dade police say. Now, I'm not trying to say anything here. I don't want any of this to be confused for really anything. But if you expected the police to come out and say anything other than he was resisting, I don't know what you were thinking, because this is just what they did. I have no idea. I got no evidence here. I don't know what's going on, but there's a lot of questions that are still to be answered, and it's just an unfortunate situation, right? We saw this happen just a couple months ago in golf when Scotty Scheffler was arrested trying to get into the game, and from what I can tell, it's a very, very similar situation there. That police officer was put on administrative leave. We'll see what happens. I'm gonna stay off of this one for a little bit until we know more information. But it's just a loss over there. They're one of the losers of the week in the NFL, arresting Tyreek Hill for what seems like a minor traffic stop, getting him on the ground. That's the real question of what led there. And then we can form opinions once we know more, once the investigation is complete. But for now, they're in the loser section because I can't imagine Tyreek Hill did anything that drastic to be needing to be face down on the ground in handcuffs. But anyway, those are my big losers for the NFL Week 1. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if you if you had any other big losers this week. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to take a look at college football winners and losers. It was just as equally a wild college football Saturday as it was an NFL Sunday. Huge upsets. The number 5 team in the country goes down. We're going to talk about winners. We're going to talk about losers. All of that coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've just gone over the winners and losers from the NFL Week 1 kickoff season. Before we get into it, there is some breaking news. Breaking news out of the NFL for the 6th segment we just finished, and we can put this in the losers section as well. Puka Nacua is out for at least 4 weeks, being placed on the IR with a knee issue. Sean McVay, in a press conference just now, comes out. The injury is a knee injury. out at least 4 weeks, being placed officially on the IR. It's not great for the Rams. We did see the offense start to move, though, against a tough Lions defense. Cooper Kupp, career high, 14 receptions. That connection is alive and well between Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp. I was really interested to see the dynamics for Cooper Kupp, healthy Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Matthew Stafford when all three of them were healthy, but it seems like we're doomed to just have one of those guys on the field at any given moment. We'll see what happens. This is very unfortunate for Puka Nacua and the Rams, but I do think the Rams team will be just fine. They made the playoffs without Cooper Kupp. I think they can do the same thing they did last year without Puka. We saw the Stafford Kupp connection win a Super Bowl. So, not necessarily too worried, but it is definitely a little bit worrying. Their depth, especially their offensive line depth, not where you want it to be. But anyway, we're going to get into some college football winners and losers in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, September 9th. But like I was saying, getting into college football. College football was equally, if not more insane than that Sunday that we just went over. From the early games where we saw Texas absolutely destroy Michigan, to a late game that saw Ashton Genty and Boise State nearly take down the behemoth that is Oregon. We'll break down all the winners, all the losers, starting off with the winners here. And what's a better place to start than what was the headlining game of the week? Maybe the headlining game of the season. Definitely the biggest one to date. Number 3, Texas, heading up to Ann Arbor, playing a game in the Big House, taking on the number 10 Michigan Wolverines. And my God, did Texas make a statement. Their defense completely shut down the Michigan offense. Texas comes in and basically does whatever they want. Quinn Ewers vaulted himself very high into the Heisman conversation. Texas might be back. Texas looks like one of, if not the best teams in the nation, inarguably a top 3 team, arguably the best team in the nation. Now, that's a competition with Georgia that I am not personally going to get into. But Texas looked really good. Again, their offense got anything they wanted. They were able to completely shut down that defense until the Michigan offense until a garbage time touchdown. They just look like one of the most complete teams in football. And it's going to be really, really, really tough to stop this Texas team. Continuing on in that early window, another team I was really impressed by, former Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord, and the Syracuse Orange. I know Syracuse is not a football school, but they bring in a lot of transfers from a lot of big programs, including quarterback Kyle McCord, who was kind of shunned out of Ohio State after not being able to run an offense good enough to beat Jim Harbaugh and Michigan and really compete for a national title. Putting even Ryan Day's job in jeopardy is kind of crazy. He comes into Syracuse, looks good in his first game. Not a great team, but does his job, wins a game against Ohio. Comes in week 2 against a now ranked opponent in Georgia Tech, and that offense could not be stopped. Syracuse is a fun team, a physical team, a fast team. They're one of my favorite teams, and quite honestly, I am shocked that they aren't ranked. Syracuse looked really good. They beat a top 25 opponent in Georgia Tech. Again, I personally don't think they should have been ranked after Florida State, but they were. They ranked after Florida State. They come in to Syracuse. They lose that game in It looked closer than it was. It ends up being a 3-point game, but Kyle McCord and Syracuse were up 2 possessions basically the whole time. That defense from Syracuse was able to stop a very potent run attack, a run attack that no one had been able to stop up to this point in that with Georgia Tech, right? That's a huge ACC win in a wide open ACC conference. Really, Syracuse vaulting themselves up into contention for that ACC title. You have Miami, which head and shoulders above everybody else in the ACC. It's their thing to lose. They could still lose it. Anything could happen. Below them, in my opinion, if we're doing ACC rankings here, Louisville at 2, and then Syracuse, and then I mean, there's a couple other ACC options, but Syracuse has vaulted themselves up into that top tier of ACC teams, that second tier competing for that second spot in the ACC finals. Syracuse looks really good, and quite honestly, I am shocked that they are not ranked. Another one that I wanted to point out in the early window of games, an early window of games that was phenomenal to watch. QB Darian Mensah out of Tulane looks like a world beater. A freshman who was starting on who was a practice squad guy, started his second career game, comes out against a Kansas State team that's ranked currently in the top 15 after squeaking out a victory. A victory that, quite honestly, they probably shouldn't have won. They won on a kind of ticky-tacky offensive pass interference call on a game-tying touchdown by Tulane. This is a very, very good Tulane team. Tomorrow, we're going to do a group of 5 top 20. We're going to do a top 25 ranking. I've done mine. We're going to react to the AP as well. And I'm also going to do a group of 5 top 5. Don't be surprised if Tulane makes it on that list higher than you think. Tulane and Darian Mensah look explosive on that offense. Not to mention those weapons on the wide receiver in the wide receiver room. Mario Williams, number 4 on Tulane, looked like he was unguardable. Honestly, I was watching him after I watched the Packers and Jaden Reed. I mean, he looks like, if we're doing comparisons, they did this on the live broadcast, and then I could not stop seeing it. Darian Mensah and Jordan Love, their throwing motions, their throwing style, the way they move around in the pocket, they almost look identical. I know people are talking about Nebraska, Dylan Raiola and Patrick Mahomes in that comparison, but Jordan Love and Darian Mensah, kind of the same way, kind of looking pretty similar the way they play the game of football. And Jaden Reed and Mario Williams, again, kind of looking similar. This Tulane team could be dangerous. This Tulane team is very, very good this year. Moving on to the late window of games, and this is probably the one you guys have been waiting for, talking about college football week 2 winners. How about Northern Illinois? How about Northern Illinois coming into South Bend, Indiana, being paid $1.5 million to do it, and knocking off number 5 Notre Dame? Now, there are a lot of issues with Notre Dame, and we're going to talk about Notre Dame kicking off the losers section of this show, which is going to come up in our next segment. But Northern Illinois controlled that game. They win on incredible special teams play, not only blocking a field goal to end the game, but they blocked another field goal earlier on in the game to keep them ahead heading into halftime. Their run defense, really their defense entirely really stepped up, and maybe that says more about Notre Dame. Again, we'll get into Notre Dame in the next segment, but that grit, that ability to play in a tight game and just control the time of possession, make your way through a tough Notre Dame defense. I don't think anyone is arguing Notre Dame's defense isn't really good, but Northern Illinois with a top 5 victory. They had never won a game against a top 5 program. They were 0-51 in their history. One of the biggest upsets in college football history. Northern Illinois comes in. Now they're ranked at 25. That's super exciting for that program. Again, we'll see if that makes them in this new college football format. Maybe that eliminates Notre Dame and puts Northern Illinois into that 12 spot. Again, tomorrow we'll go through all of that. We'll do a top 5 group of 5 ranking. But my God, was that so much fun to watch. 2 more things, 2 more winners, and then we're gonna head into the losers after that. Clemson putting up 66 against a good App State team. App State is a team that, I thought was in contention for that group of 5 spot. I talked up the Sun Belt a lot, but they kind of fizzled out a little bit this week against some opponents that I think they should have done better against. But App State loses by 40. Maybe that's just Georgia. Maybe Georgia really is just that special. Clemson only able to put up 3 points against them, but my God, they didn't have to do that to App State. They went out there and they said, hey, we deserve to be in this conversation. I know I kind of counted Clemson out when I went through that ACC stuff, but if they can continue to play like this, if Cade Klubnik can continue to put up offensive numbers like this, maybe they're still in the running there. Maybe I counted them out just a little bit too soon. Clemson's a good team. Georgia's a better team. They absolutely wrecked shop against App State, kind of destroyed their playoff resume, honestly. That was a game I expected Clemson to win, but I thought that would be a lot closer. And finally, Boise State and Ashton Genty. And really, I want to focus more on Ashton Genty here. Ashton Genty has a chance to do something that has not been done as long as I can remember. He has the chance to win the Heisman as a group of 5 player. Ashton Genty through 2 weeks, 467 yards and 9 touchdowns. He is on pace for almost 3,000 rushing yards. He is on pace for over 50 touchdowns this season. That is ridiculous numbers. Now, that's inflated numbers. He's not going to run for 50 touchdowns, but what if he did? What if he did? He rushed for 6 in week 1, 3 in week 2, over 200 yards both times. Almost upsets a top 10 team in the country near single-handedly, I must say. This Boise State team and Ashton Genty, they're going to be some trouble. Ashton Genty is very firmly in that Heisman conversation, and very firmly he should stay in there. I know he's going to get discounted because group of 5. I know he's going to get discounted because he's not a quarterback, but he should absolutely be in that conversation. Kind of crazy how he fell through the cracks and got to a school like Boise State. And I know I said last one, but I didn't have this one in my notes. I apologize. Colorado, man. Colorado is done. Coach Prime might be fired at the end of this season. Just the way that they're playing, Nebraska comes out and absolutely destroys them. We saw them almost lose to North Dakota State, who personally, I think North Dakota State is kind of getting a little bit too much flack here because they're still a very good program. And they almost beat them because they're a very good program, but that defense can't do anything. They cannot run the ball. It's literally Travis Hunter against the world. Shadur Sanders holds the ball way too long. That offensive line is a mess. Coach Prime doesn't really know how to coach a program. He can build up a program with lots of names and talent because he attracts it, but he doesn't know how to coach it. And that is seriously becoming a very real issue. They're going to continue to get all of this hype as long as he's there, and maybe that's enough for Colorado, getting their program back in the spotlight for the first time in almost 20 years. But maybe they want to start to win games. And unfortunately, that's going to have to come with the price of losing Coach Prime, I think, because the way I see it, they're not going to be a successful college program with him there unless something drastic changes. He had a year to adjust to the higher level of competition. He didn't do anything. He doesn't recruit. He needs to start recruiting. He can't just sit there and, quite frankly, be lazy as a coach. He's just saying, hey guys, my name is Deion Sanders. Come play for me. And it works. It does, because he's got the aura. He's got the kind of energy that you want to play with if you're a good team, but he doesn't know how to team build. He doesn't know how to get that chemistry in, and it's just not going to work out for Colorado if he continues to be that coach. I know that was winners, but there's a preview for the losers right there. Nebraska. Nebraska is the winner here. Dylan Raiola looked really good, and that Nebraska team looks unstoppable. I won't say unstoppable, but their line, they're physical, and if they can play like that with the offense they have, the defense can just play solid. They're a real threat to make a run this season. But yeah, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to continue our losers. I know it kind of started that one a little early, My fault. Couldn't wait. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, September 9th. If you are just tuning in, we've been doing a quick little skim over, honestly, of all the wild stuff that happened this weekend in football. We went through winners and losers in the NFL, and we just finished going over winners in college football. In this segment, we're going to take a look at those losers, the teams that did not do what we wanted them, the teams that came out flat, and were quite honestly very disappointing. We'll talk about all of that in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw it in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, September 9th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into a little bit more of the losers here for college football. I know it kind of started that segment early, and oops, I apologize. I had to get that Colorado stuff off my chest, but we're going to get into arguably the biggest loser. Maybe, not even arguably, the biggest loser of the week, Notre Dame. How does Notre Dame do this every single year? Notre Dame, we talked about Northern Illinois and their crazy comeback. That's not comeback, their crazy victory. We talked about it from one side, but now let's take a look at it from the loser side. Notre Dame. Notre Dame, the number 5 team in the nation, coming off of a huge win, beating number 20 at the time, Texas A&M, in a tight battle that I thought both of these teams are good. Then maybe it's just because they're riding high off this win, but this happens every year with Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They play a weak schedule, and they find a way to lose a game that they should not lose, quite honestly. Notre Dame comes in, and just their offense can't go. They have no weapons. You have Riley Leonard, who can run the ball, but when you go up against a solid run defense or a healthy defense or one that's keying in on the run and you can't throw the ball, you don't have the weapons to throw the ball over the top, it's still, it turns out the way you just saw it. You put up 14 points against a MAC school in Northern Illinois that honestly was not amongst the MAC contenders. They go ahead and they beat the number 5 team in the country, and I don't want to take anything away from that. I really don't, because Notre Dame's defense is nothing to scoff at, but you let them block 2 field goals. You let them block one at the end of the half, and you let them block one at the end of the game. That's incredible special teams from Northern Illinois, but awful execution by Notre Dame. They could not get anything going offensively, and that is just awful. I think Marcus Freeman is very much on the hot seat. I don't know if he'll be able to make it. Brian Kelly wasn't the greatest coach in the world, but he wasn't losing consistently to teams like Northern Illinois, right? He was getting the wins that they should, keeping them in that top 10 conversation. Now Notre Dame falls all the way back to number 18 in the poll, and I don't even have them in mind. Just a little bit of a sneak peek for you for what's going to come out tomorrow. But this is a really, really distressing sign for Notre Dame. I really don't have the words to describe how bad this is. Their offense is just offensive the way it is. They need to get weapons. They can't just rely on a great defense. It's awesome to have a great defense, and I think all the great teams have a great defense. But again, that's only half of the battle. They need to get the playmakers. They have a running back. He looked solid. He hurdled over a man on his way to the end zone. That was one of the best plays I saw all day. But still, they couldn't get anything done. That was their one big play. It was just a mess. Notre Dame needs to go back to the drawing board and seriously think about some of the stuff that got done. A bunch of other ranked teams also lost. And before I get into them specifically, they were all in the Big 12. That's not true. Even the ones that didn't win, that did win, were in the Big 12. Some teams that really were concerning. First of all, Kansas loses from the Big 12. They lose to Illinois. Illinois looked really solid. I wasn't expecting that out of them. I don't think a lot of people were. The rest of the Big 12, especially in that early slate, really struggled against some teams that they're clearly better than, which is why they ended up winning. Kansas State, which we talked about when we talked about Tulane. Tulane might be a bigger issue, but Oklahoma State played ugly football against Arkansas, a team they were down multiple scores to, a team where their quarterback, Taylon Green of Arkansas, I mean, just the whole game was ugly, really. He threw a pick six. It was awful pick six. That got them back into the game. Ollie Gordon couldn't get anything going against an Arkansas defense that is not that good, honestly. Many mistakes on both sides of the ball there. It was just kind of an ugly game. The whole Big 12 kind of looked bad last week. The whole conference takes a bit of a step down. It's just a mess. It really is. It's just ugly football. That double overtime game between Oklahoma State and Arkansas is maybe it was the tightest game of the week, but it was just ugly to watch. Michigan. We're talking about losers. We can't miss out on Michigan. The Michigan offense in particular. I mean, look, Texas is a great team, and I don't want to sit here and say, hey, I expected I don't want to sit here and say, Michigan, you're done, because Texas is the second best team in the nation, arguably the best team in the nation. Talk about Georgia there. But that offense couldn't get anything done against Fresno State. They especially couldn't get anything done against Texas. The defense looked fine. Like, Texas was moving the ball up and down, but they made a couple of stops in the red zone. They turned the ball over once or twice. And if the offense was able to even be half of what it was last season, this could have been a game. Or at least it wouldn't have been a blowout. This could have been a game that I'm talking about, hey, Michigan showed some sparks. But no, Michigan was sparkless. Their offense, their players, their best player, Loveland, their tight end, dropped the ball. Just no defense, caught the ball, fumbled it with no interference from anyone at least once, maybe more times. I know he fumbled multiple times. The passing attack is going nowhere. And when you can key in on the run, you know the run is their main offense. It's just not going to work. Sharon Moore is not the answer at head coach. Again, I keep talking about these huge disappointments. It's only week 2. Maybe they can turn the season around, but I am ready to fire a lot of these coaches. Marcus Freeman, Coach Prime, Sharon Moore. Some of these guys are heavy on the hot seat. It's boiling with where they are sitting. And it's just, I won't even say a little bit, it's a lot concerning. I kept Michigan in the rankings. Again, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But I'm on the fence about him. I didn't want to punish him too harshly for going against a great team like Texas. Continuing, Oregon. The Oregon Ducks are a team I was really high on. The Oregon Ducks looked really bad against Idaho, only winning by 10 points. And then they escape with their lives against what I think is a really good Boise State team. Obviously, we talked about Ashton Genty and the Boise State Broncos last segment, but that Oregon team is just as concerning as Boise State is appealing, right? You talk about this team that, again, they put up the stats. The offense is putting up the numbers. The defense is very concerning. The defense letting letting Ashton Genty run wild on them 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Maybe that's unavoidable at this point, but you have to go off the assumption that you can, if you are a championship caliber team, you can stop anyone from rushing for 200 yards on you. And I think that kind of has to be a prerequisite for being a championship level defense. Boise State was able to move the ball up and down the field. They were able to get clutch drives. Oregon barely escapes with a victory. Their offensive line is abysmal. Oh my God, they cannot run the ball. They cannot get too much. They have no protection for their quarterback back there. It is a mess. It is super concerning for Oregon. Now, they're a top 10 team. They're still a very good team. They're still 2-0. Good teams find a way to win. As much as I'm kind of dogging on Kansas State, on Oklahoma State, on Oregon, they found a way to win. Good teams find a way to win. But it's so concerning watching these teams play. If they go up against an Ohio State in the playoffs, if they go up against a Georgia, against a Texas in the playoffs, against a Miami, what are these teams going to do against a team that's firing on all cylinders? They can't afford to make these mistakes. That's how you lose games. And it's just not a good look for these teams. And the last one I want to talk about, and I won't put them in as a full loser, just a half loser, because I kind of feel bad for them. Utah, we were talking about Cam Rising looking so good last week. 5 touchdowns, leading them to a huge victory. And then he gets hurt again. Cam Rising, leading Utah to a huge victory over Baylor, hurts his hand. I don't know how long he's out for, but that Utah team is reverting back to last season. A Utah team with a great defense, but no offense to speak of. Much like Iowa, who lost last week to Iowa State. Iowa State, big winner. But having no offense is just like when we talked about Oregon. You need that defense. You need both sides of the ball. Cam Rising, when he's there, this Utah team is a championship contender, and I fully believe that. This Utah defense is good enough to win a championship, and with a quarterback like Cam Rising, their offense is good enough as well. We've seen it. We've seen them be in position to make even the 4-team playoff when he's there, just losing a couple of close games at the end. They were absolutely 12-team playoff contenders with Cam Rising. But without him, we see what happens. They almost lose to a hapless Baylor team, only able to put up 23 points total. Most of that came with Cam Rising on the field. Hopefully it's not too bad, but they need to find a backup plan for when Cam Rising is hurt, because he has shown inability to stay on the football field, which is just a shame because he is a very, very good quarterback, and this Utah team is very, very good when he is playing. But anyway, let me know who your biggest losers were for college football week 2. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we are going to preview Monday Night Football, a massive matchup with huge implications, not just for the rest of the year, but also for fantasy, between the New York Jets and the San Francisco 49ers taking place tonight. We'll talk about that when we come back on the other side of the break. Stick around. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, September 9th. Monday Night Football is right around the corner. We're going to be previewing this on this segment, but if you are just tuning in, we've just gone through the winners and losers for both the NFL Crazy Sunday and a crazy upset-filled college football Saturday. Like I said, in this segment, we're taking a look at Monday Night Football, a preview of one of the biggest games, a potential Super Bowl matchup between Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, and the San Francisco 49ers. That's taking place in just 2 hours from now on ESPN. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, September 9th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into Monday Night Football preview. Monday Night Football is between two of the premier teams in the league. My Super Bowl pick out of the AFC, the New York Jets, taking on the defending NFC champions, the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco currently is favored by 4.5 points, 4 points. It's about a 4-point spread there. This is going to be a great game. These two teams are some of the most complete teams in the entire NFL. The 49ers, I don't think I have to explain this to you. They have arguably the scariest group of talent, of wide receiver talent, of skill position talent in the NFL, surrounded with Brock Purdy, one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, anchored by one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL, in Trent Williams, obviously Debo, Brandon Ayuk coming back after signing his contract. Ricky Pearsall is in the building after being shot. You have one of the best head coaches in the league in Kyle Shanahan, and that defense is scary. It's one of the best defenses in the NFL. Again, I keep saying that sentence, but it's true. That's one of the most complete teams, but then you look across the sideline, and you see arguably a team that is more complete than the San Francisco 49ers, and you can call me crazy for saying that, but I think they are. That defense is better. Straight up, that defense is better. The combination of pass rushing, which I'm going to give the edge to the 49ers on, but the secondary, I give the edge to the Jets, and the same thing with the linebackers, although I think that's pretty even. The secondary, I just think, is a huge difference between the Jets and the 49ers. That defense is better over there in New York. The offensive line, if everything clicks into place like we think it should with these new starters, arguably better. I won't say it is, but it is. It's arguably better. Garrett Wilson is the best receiver on that field. You get Mike Williams, who is a crazy deep threat. Tight ends, not the same, but Breece Hall, comparable with McCaffrey maybe, and Aaron Rodgers is undoubtedly a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. So I think this is going to be an incredible game to watch tonight. I cannot wait to see it. As far as my prediction goes, this is going to be a very close game. Now, do I think it's going to be a high-scoring game based on what we saw on Sunday? No. I was very much high on offenses on Sunday because I thought, they would be able to get a little momentum going, but it's week one. A lot of these guys didn't play in the preseason, and that's that's absolutely true for the Jets, right? This is a team that didn't really play in the preseason. Aaron Rodgers was barely around for camp. They might take a beat to get going. The 49ers just had these two teams arguably had the worst off seasons in the NFL. The Jets are still dealing with it, with Hassan Reddick not being there, getting fined $800K every game, plus the $5 million he's already been fined for not showing up. You have the 49ers dealing with the whole Brandon Ayuk saga, the whole main situation of the NFL season. These two teams' offenses, I think, are going to be a little discombobulated because they didn't have a lot of time to work. So it's going to be a little slower offensively. Maybe they pick it up by the second half. This is going to be a defensive battle, and because of that, I can't do it. No. This is going to be a defensive battle, but I think the offensive weapons for the 49ers, they've been so cohesive together for longer. I think I'm going to lean a little bit towards the 49ers in this one, although I do think this is absolutely going to be a very tight game. Leaning 49ers in this one. But this should be a great game. And like I said, it's a potential Super Bowl preview. This is something that we could see a matchup later on. All the primetime games have been really, really good so far. We had the Chiefs and the Ravens going down to the last second. We had a Hail Mary attempt by Malik Willis in Brazil. Overtime game, the first overtime game of the season in our last primetime game between the Lions and the Rams. If we're continuing that streak, there's no reason not to think this should be a very, very good game between the Jets and the 49ers. But let me know what you think. I'm taking the 49ers in this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning into today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. There was a lot to cover this weekend. There's still more that I missed, and we'll get into all of that tomorrow. Hope you tune in for it. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I will see you same time. Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Let's go. It's gonna be a bad day.